Welcome to Jack Markham and Martha Rigby's excellent explanation of Irving's algorithm for stable roommate matching. So what does the algorithm do? Fairly simple. Take a set of people, have them list in preferences from best to worst, everybody else within the set. It will find pairs for everybody in that set, which will be the best possible combination. What do I mean by best possible combination? Well, I actually mean stability. Stability is fairly simple to explain by explaining what isn't stable. An unstable combination example is if you took two people who were not in a pair, but would actually both prefer to be in a pair together than in their current pairs. That is unstable. This algorithm finds the best stable pairings, or it explains that there are no suitable stable pairings to be found. For a start, here's the pseudocode which we'll go over shortly, which you can see breaks up into three main points. This code has been provided by Dima Darman of the University of Bristol, which we've made some slight modifications to, just for ways we prefer in readability. So what does loop 1 of the algorithm do? It finds the first person in the set who currently is unmatched. It asks them to propose to their favourite roommate. If that roommate has not already received a proposal, they say yes. However, if they have received a proposal, they can do one of two things. If they prefer the proposal from AI, then they reject their old proposer and accept AI's new proposal. However, if they do not prefer the new proposer from AI, then they reject AI's proposal and AI has to go to the next person on their preference list. The second loop is fairly easy. Once everybody has proposed to someone and had some sort of match, then every person who's been proposed to looks at everybody on their preferences below who has proposed to them and cross them off the list so they can in no way be paired with them over their current pairing. The final part of the loop looks a little confusing, but when we go over an example it'll become clear. We're here to find cycles at this point, so we start with somebody in the set, we go to their second preference, from their second preference we take the second preference's last preference, from that last preference we take that last preference's second preference, and this continues until the row P has a cycle. That is, one of the people in the set appears more than once. Once that happens, we eliminate every pairing that occurs between those points. It will become much clearer when you see the example. For this hypothetical example, assume there is a group of super pop stars on tour, but unfortunately in this very bizarre situation, they have to share hotel rooms. They are Adele, Beyonce, Celia Green, Gloria Gaynor, JoJo and Taylor Swift. This example is actually one that's more or less just modified from the one from Wikipedia, but I thought this might make it a bit more entertaining. So, let us follow loop 1 in the algorithm. We start with Adele, whose first preference is Celia Green, and she proposes to him that they spend the night together, in a purely platonic matter. Celia Green looks, says, "No one has currently proposed to me, so yes, I accept." They are paired. Next on the list, Beyonce proposes to Taylor Swift. Now, to be honest, Taylor Swift isn't that keen on Beyonce, but no one else has asked her yet, so she says, yeah, sure, why not? Next, it's Celia Green's turn. Now, despite the fact he's been proposed to, he hasn't yet proposed to anyone else, and therefore it's totally allowable that he says to Beyonce, hey, can we buddy up? And even though she's asked Taylor Swift, no one's asked her, so she's allowed to say at this point, yes, sure, we can. There are no such confusing ethical dilemmas, however, for Gloria Gaynor, who simply proposes to JoJo, who has, poor girl, had no one propose to her, so she also says yes. Now it's JoJo's turn to propose, and she proposes to her first preference, Celia Green. This is where it gets a bit more complicated. Celia Green has already been proposed to by Adele, but he compares and decides he prefers JoJo. So he says to Adele, never mind, forget you, and pairs up with JoJo. This is quite nasty, and we have to go straight back to Adele to make sure she now has a new partner to propose to. But never mind Adele, I'm sure you'll find someone like Celia Green. In this case, you choose that person to be Gloria Gaynor. Why not? Gloria has had no one propose to her, and so, of course, she accepts, being the kind soul she is. And so we come to Taylor Swift. Taylor, liking Jojo very much, proposes to her, but Jojo says, "Leave now, get out, I'm not interested, I'd much rather stay with Gloria Gaynor." So poor Taylor Swift has to cross Jojo off her list. So Taylor Swift shakes it off, picks herself up, looks at Adele and says, "Adele, can I propose to you?" Adele is overjoyed. She sets fire to the rain. No one has yet proposed to her, and so instantly she says yes. And so we come to the second part of the algorithm. For example, let's look at CeeLo Green. Now, CeeLo Green has already rejected Adele previously, but there is someone still below his preferences of people who can propose to him, and that is Taylor Swift. He rejects Taylor Swift, so not only does he cross out Taylor Swift in his preferences, but Taylor Swift also has to cross out CeeLo Green in hers. Elsewhere, Adele has to decide to do the same thing. She decides that Jojo, being less preferable to her to be proposed by than Taylor Swift, is to be removed from her list. Jojo, at the same time, removes Adele from her list. And so, once all the drama is settled, and everybody takes a breather, we can update our grid to show more clearly who has what preferences left available. And so we begin the final and critical part of the algorithm. Let's start with by picking Adele. She has more than one preference at this point. We can clearly see that Adele's second preference is Beyonce, and so we put Beyonce on this lower row here. Now we can see that this top row is the row of P's and this bottom row is the row of Q's. And so we look at Beyonce and we look at the algorithm and we say we now need to find the last preference of Q, of Beyonce. That is CeeLo Green. So up here we place C for CeeLo Green. CeeLo Green, being in the row of P, looks at his second preference, which is of course at this point Gloria Gaynor. So down in the Q row we put G for Gloria Gaynor. Now it's Gloria Gaynor's turn. What is her last preference, as she is a Q, and a Q must always find the last preference? Well, it's Adele. So Adele goes up the top. But this is an important point, because we now have a cycle, because along the top row, the P's, we have a repetition. Now, once we find the cycle, we find every pair that occurs between the start of it and at the end of it. So in this case, it goes always from bottom left to top right. Beyonce is paired with CeeLo Green. Gloria Gaynor is paired with Adele. Now we have to eliminate these pairings. What does that actually mean when I say eliminate? Fairly simple, as the table shows. Beyonce eliminates CeeLo Green from her preferences. At the exact same time, CeeLo Green eliminates Beyonce from his preferences. Even though he really liked her. He doesn't care. He's seen her driving around town with her new guy and he's like, forget you. Meanwhile, the same thing happens with Gloria Gaynor and Adele. Adele dumps Gloria Gaynor, despite the fact she is one of her highest preferences. And so, Adele doesn't care, because she'll move on and she'll find someone else like her. Gloria Gaynor, though, she never really liked Adele that much, and so she will survive. Now you get the idea, we can speed up. We start with Adele, whose second preference is Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's last preference is Beyonce. Beyonce's second preference is Jojo, and so the following is constructed, and as you can see, a cycle is formed, which means we have to eliminate links between Taylor Swift to Beyonce, Jojo to Gloria Gaynor, and Beyonce to Adele. The next time around the loop, we don't start Adele, because she now only has one preference, and instead start Beyonce, and continue again. As you can see, we continue and continually find cycles until we've eliminated every cycle we can find, and everybody is down to simply one preference. Finally, we have eliminated everybody's preferences, so they are left with only one. And it's very important to note that in this stage loop 3 of the algorithm, if at any point we end up accidentally eliminating somebody so they have no preferences left, then it becomes clear that there is not a stable matching solution for the set you have been given. As you can see, you're not guaranteed to get somebody that you like particularly much at all, but ultimately it's the best you could have got out of the situation. Finally, a quick note about the complexity of this algorithm. It's overall an order of n squared. The simple reason is because the first loop and the third loop both are also of the order of n squared.